Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session focuses on the procedure in whole language method. I hope and expect by the end of this session, you will be able to understand the nature of the procedures that are involved in whole language method when it is used for teaching a language in a classroom. Well, the issue of what instructional characteristics are specific to whole language is somewhat very problematic. According to Bergeron 1990, whole language was described differently in each article of the 64 articles she surveyed, except those written by the same author. So, the interpretation of the term whole language itself varies from one article to the other according to this author. She found only 4 classroom features mentioned in more than 50% of the articles. And these particular features included, number 1, the use of literature that was common in all the classes. Number 2, the use of process writing, which was found common. Number 3, the encouragement of cooperative learning amongst the students. And finally, or fourthly, the concern for students' attitude was an important parameter. As far as the nature of the activities that are used in the process or the procedure, activities that are often used, they include individual and small group reading and writing. Also, ungraded dialogue journals are used where the students would write dialogues in their journals and those would be brought to the classroom. Writing portfolios is another important feature of these activities. Writing conferences or student-made books or story writing are all the kind of common activities that are used in a whole language method classroom. And one of the central features of all these activities that I hope you would have noticed is that they are all student-centered and most of them are created by the students themselves or in collaboration with other students or even in collaboration with the teacher. Many of these activities are also common in other instructional approaches such as communicative language teaching or content-based teaching or task-based language teaching. Perhaps the only feature of whole language that does not appear centrally in discussions of communicative approaches to language teaching is the focus on literature. This is what makes the whole language method different from what I would say communicative language teaching method that is used in ELT methodologies. Suggestions for exploitation of literary resources in the whole language classroom will be familiar to language teachers with a similar interest in the use of literature in support of second language learning. Now, what differs in whole language teaching is not the incidental use of such activities based on the topic of the lesson or an item in the syllabus, but their use as a part of an overall philosophy of teaching and learning that gives a new meaning to the material that is brought to the classroom, that gives a new purpose to the activities that are brought to the classroom, keeping a holistic picture of the teaching learning process in mind. Here I would give you one example of that. For example, whole language workshop involves activities that are built around the use of parallel texts. So 2 English translations of the same short story, for example, would be used for this purpose. Study of the 2 translations highlights the range of linguistic choices open to the writer and, of course, to the translator, in the contrast of linguistic choices that are made by the translator and the responses that are made to these choices by the students as readers. In pairs, now the students would act. One student would act as the presenter or interpreter of one of the 2 short stories translations, and a partner would act as a presenter or as the interpreter of the other story, that is the second story. Well, my dear students, if you look at the full screen text that I'm showing you here is an example of parallel texts. Opening sentences are taken from 2 translations of a Korean short story. So if you look at heading 1A, Cranes by Hwang Sun-won, that is translated by Kevin O'Rourke. The translation goes as, "The village on the northern side of the 38th parallel frontier was ever so quiet and desolate beneath the high, clear autumn sky. White grounds leaned on white gourds as they swayed in the yard of an empty house. Now compare this with 1B, heading 1B, that is the second last heading on this slide. The Crane, this is by, again, the same story by the same writer, but the translation this time is by Kim Se-young. The translation goes as, the northern village at the border of the 38th parallel was ever so snug under the bright, high autumn sky. In the space between the two main rooms of the empty farmhouse, a white, empty gourd was lying against another white, empty gourd. So you can already, I hope, notice the parallel translations, how in some ways they are similar, but in many ways they are different. Now, based on these two extracts of the translations of the same story, there can be different activities that a teacher can use in the classroom of a whole language teaching method language classroom. For example, number one, the teacher can ask the students to think of the village as it is described in 1A and in 1B as two different villages. And then the teacher may ask them, which one would you choose to live in and why? So, enabling them to have discussions on and to think about why would they choose a particular village to live in based on the description that is given. This would be a whole language method activity encompassing all the aspects of learning, not focusing on just a few, segmental aspects of language. Another activity that can be used can be where the teacher can ask, do the contrasting opening sentences set up any different expectations in the reader as to what kind of story will follow and what the tone of the story will be? Again, this can be used as a source to generate discussions in the class. And the third possibility is, on a map of Korea, they can be asked to, each partner should indicate where he or she thinks the village is located. Are the locations the same? If not, why not? So again, this would generate a kind of debate. A fourth possible activity can be where they can be asked to write an opening sentence of a short story in which they would briefly introduce the village of 1A as it might appear in winter rather than in autumn. Fifth possible activity can be where they can be asked to write two parallel text opening sentences in which they would describe in different words a village they know. So ask a partner which village he or she refers to. And again, this would generate a discussion. And the sixth activity can be based on the discussion of where they can be asked to discuss what different kinds of stories might follow on the basis of the opening sentences and write an original first sentence of this story, thinking of yourself as translator. So basically, they would be asked to put themselves in the shoes of the translator and drawing on both the translations as their resources. They can be asked to do that and to discuss that. Well, my dear students, I hope that this activity and the examples based on the two different versions of translation of this activity have shown you how the whole language method operates and how a teacher can design various activities based on the literary texts that he or she can bring to the classroom.